So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming here this morning. This is a press conference with the newly elected chair of the IPCC, Dr. Hoesung Lee, of the Republic of Korea. Dr. Lee will read out a short opening statement, and then we'll be very pleased to take your questions. So over to you, Hoesung.
Thank you, Jonathan. Let me also welcome everyone who is joining today's press conference. This has been a hard-fought race, and the first thing I want to do is praise the colleagues who also took part. They are scientists for whom I have the highest regard, and I thank them for the way they participated in this election. I also want to thank our Korean government for nominating me for this important task. And I also thank the member governments of IPCC for electing myself to serve as a new chair. And I will rely upon their full support for the next cycle of IPCC. Communications is a very critical component of the IPCC's work, and it is something that I'm committed to further improving. It is also why I'm so grateful to be able to speak with you today. Your coverage of the IPCC work is essential to helping the world understand not only the dangers of climate change, but the opportunities we have for preventing it and adapting to it. I look forward to getting to know many of you during my term as a IPCC chair. I promise to do my best to be candid and helpful. I'm deeply grateful and honored to have been elected to chair the IPCC. The IPCC is now 27 years old and has accomplished much over this period. It has helped increase knowledge about climate science, but there's still much more to be understood. We know with 95% confidence that human activity is causing climate change. We know that to avoid the severe, pervasive, and irreversible consequences that will come, we will need to act now. We know that the time is not on our side. The good news is that we know that we can prevent such an outcome and build a more resilient and prosperous world by taking a fresh approach to our energy needs. But there's much more to do. Let me be somewhat more specific. One of my priorities in the next cycle of IPCC will be to enhance the participation of developing country experts. We need this expertise to fill in our knowledge gaps about the climate's impacts across the whole planet. And this knowledge will help countries determine which adaptation and mitigation measures they will need to take. IPCC has done a great deal already to recruit more developing country experts, but we can't stop now. We can do better. How will we do this? You may have a question on this. We can identify and network with local centers of excellence in areas of climate science, adaptation, and mitigation. We can do the same with issues related to economic development, poverty reduction. The IPCC can also engage the business and finance sectors. Governments cannot solve the problem of climate change alone. We need the best and brightest from the private sector to become increasingly involved to interpret our findings and act upon them. One of the important innovations of the recently completed fifth assessment report was to define the concept of the carbon budget, as you are well aware now. This is an idea that helps policymakers and business leaders understand the implications of our current way of life and the limitations that it imposes if we are to avoid dangerous climate change. As an economist dealing with the energy and climate issues, I'm particularly interested in climate change as it relates to job creation, health, innovation and technology development, energy access, and poverty alleviation. With the fifth assessment report, IPCC took a major step in this direction as new chair of IPCC, I intend to increase attention on these issues. The hard science of climate change will remain the core foundation of the IPCC work. As much as we already know, there is always room to know more, to better understand how this complex and complicated thing we call the climate system works and sustains us. In short, I want to support what has worked, keep what is needed, and change what needs improvement across the IPCC. I want to ensure that the IPCC remains a dynamic institution that provides relevant information not only to policymakers, but also to businesses, civil society organizations, and to everyday citizens. With that, I welcome your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hoesung. So now we'll take questions, both from media present in the room and also media following this press conference via the webcast. And you can, if you're following this through the webcast, please email your questions to ipcc-media@wmo.int. I think you can see that on the screen behind us. ipcc-media@wmo.int, giving us your question and also specifying the media you represent. So are there any questions from journalists in the room? Do we have any questions yet from outside the room? We'll wait a few minutes, but maybe I could start with a question. What would be the first thing you would hope to do as chairman of the IPCC?
I think, as I mentioned very briefly in my opening statement, the first thing IPCC need to do is to increase the participation experts from developing countries. It is very important that we achieve that goal, especially during this cycle of IPCC assessment, as we all know that to achieve that 2 degrees stabilizations, the world requires a meaningful participation of climate policies, participation in this process by developing countries, because we know that the future emissions is expected to increase in the developing regions, and where we also know that the countries need to improve their standard of living, but at the same time, that increase in standard of living has to be achieved in a way that will not burden the atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gas emissions. This is a very tough task, and the world need to understand the constraints and opportunities that the developing countries will have in the next few years of their endeavor to participate in the global climate change deliberations. And I think the first step that IPCC must take in the next assessment is to increase meaningful participation of developing regions if we are serious about achieving this 2 degrees C stabilization.
Thank you. Any questions in the room? Any questions by email so far? Well, can I follow up on that last one then? The IPCC has often talked about raising the participation of developing countries in the past. How do you think we can achieve that now?
You are right. Ever since the first assessment, IPCC has been very keen on improving the developing country participation. We have adopted various measures, and let me say that based upon my experience serving the IPCC for 23 years, most of the measures, should I say humbly, that on ad hoc measures, and what we need from now is to install some systematic way of improving the developing country participation. We must recognize that there are a number of local centers of excellence in the analysis of climate change issues around the world, including the developing countries. If we can make the IPCC process, especially in the scoping stage of our assessment process, much more bottom-up, then we should be able to identify scholars and experts in the developing regions, and at the same time we should be able to incorporate much more in-depth, embedded deep local knowledge into our assessment process. I think the key is not a technical matter, but key is a structural matter. That is that we need to give some thought about rearranging or restructuring our way of addressing the scoping process. I wish that that process be more bottom-up, be more inclusive. I am very much looking forward to work with a new bureau about restructuring the process of scoping process. The more we invest in the scoping process based upon this region-driven scoping process, based upon this bottom-up process, our benefit from that newly structured scoping process will be much, much better than the, should I say, the business usual way of addressing our assessment process.
Thanks, Hoesung. Any questions? Okay. Well, there was a discussion yesterday on social media about how transparent the IPCC is, and there was some criticism of the IPCC there. Would you like to comment on that?
I'm aware of that, and I believe that the Bureau members and many scientists in the IPCC are also very much aware of that. And we will continue to improve the transparency of our process, and also the objectivity of our process and objectivity of our outputs. And it is a work in progress, and we will never be negligent about improving our transparency.
Thank you. So we have a question via email, and that's from Megan Darby of Climate Home. And Megan is asking, you say carbon pricing should be a priority. How do you respond to criticism that this politicizes the IPCC?
I do not think that the carbon pricing is a matter of political discussion, because carbon pricing is straight from the economics textbook, straight from the science of economic analysis, dealing with what is known as so-called externality problems. And it is not a political decision. However, the willingness on the part of the political system to absorb carbon price is a very, very important element in the initiating and also in maintaining carbon price. In that sense, it may be interpreted as a political matter. AR5 clearly indicated that, along with many other related economic literature, economic science literature, that the carbon price is the kingpin in driving us to the world of 2 degrees C stabilization. So it is based upon a very solid, robust economic analysis.
Thanks. Anything else? There's one just coming, but in the meantime, I also saw some comment on social media about the lack of women in yesterday's vote. All the candidates for chair were men. Would you like to comment on that?
Fortunately, this time, as you know, we have a very good number of female candidates for the positions of bureau, including vice chair, co-chairs, and the working group vice chairs. And we are very hopeful that the next bureau will show a great deal of advancement in terms of this gender balance. And it is very important for us to achieve and improve gender balance in our IPCC leadership position.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we have a question from Miriam Stumpfer of Bavarian Radio and Television, Bayerischer Rundfunk. And there are 2 questions from Miriam. So firstly, 2015 is a crucial year in international climate negotiations. What's your message to politicians who will meet in Paris?
We are running out of time, and IPCC AR5 clearly indicates that we must achieve a global peaking within the next few years, or at the latest 2030. And in order for us to achieve 2 degrees C stabilization with a most cost-effective way. And it is a message based upon 6 years of in-depth scientific analysis, analyzing 1,200 scenarios. And we are very firm on this scientific evidence, so that policymakers, we hope that will be keen on accepting this policy, accepting this scientific message, and on acting on this message.
Thank you, Hoesung, and effectively a follow-up question to that from Miriam. Do you think that the messages of the IPCC have an effect on policies?
I think it is work in progress, and we see that it may not be one has to be very reasonable in comparing the inputs and output. I believe in the gradual improvement is much better than a somewhat I call a structural changes in the process of implementation. I'm optimistic that scientific messages is being conveyed to policymakers in a very, very efficient and effective way.
Thank you. So we have another question now from Megan Darby of Climate Home. Can you expand on the plans in your manifesto to get more inputs from the business and finance sectors? How do you think that would help with IPCC reports?
I think this is also the part of the my plan or the thinking initiative that we need to be much more bottom up. I think a vast degree of knowledge and expertise are embedded in the business sector. It is pity that the IPCC process do not take in the wealth of the information and the wealth of knowledge the private sector have in this process. We must find some way to incorporate their knowledge and their expertise and their information into our process to make our output much more relevant in the real world decision making.
Thank you. And what focus reports, I think we mean special reports, do you think the IPCC can and should deliver ahead of the next round of assessment reports?
That question has to be determined by as you know, the whole plenary. And in fact, we have a number of proposals for a special report for the next cycle. And I believe that the new bureau and also new plenary will give a very thorough review of these proposals. And final special report will be reflecting the consensus views of all the member government, and it is at this stage is just too early, premature to say which area of the concerns be given the special report status, and it's up to the decision by Bureau and also the plenary. So I will work very closely with the Bureau and work very closely with the plenary to have the most optimum content and most optimum size of the special report.
Thank you. And a reminder that if you're following this press conference on the webcast, you can email questions to us at ipcc-media@wmo.int. Now we have a question from Rahana Dada of the Africa Report in South Africa. What is the thinking around including in assessment reports more about the successes of traditional practices related to adaptation and resilience that are not necessarily well represented or reflected in the scientific domain?
The IPCC assessment is a scientifically rigorous process, and peer-reviewed journals is the basic blocks that deserves the attention of the scientists. And also, this is the basic building block that we are going to assess. And the literature indicated outside of the, as indicated here, outside of the traditional, the area of the scientific the studies, we have discussed about the way to handle such a request. And I think the new bureau will also have to give some thought about the best way to approach so that the IPCC will be able to benefit from incorporating some of the valuable information that may be available from such sources. I think I will work very closely with Bureau to find a good way to find to enrich our information base.
Yeah, and I think to the extent that traditional knowledge is covered in peer-reviewed scientific publications, that provides a basis of material on which the IPCC can work. So it would be good, especially if scientists and researchers in developing countries were to publish on this topic. That would give us a resource.
Certainly. That is the standard way of resolving these issues. I agree.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else coming in? Well, you've had a very long career with, or an association with the IPCC. You've worked in research institutions and in the private sector, including a stint with an oil company, Exxon. What would you say to people who say this could influence the way you work at the IPCC?
I think the climate change problems has a great deal of matters related to the energy use, energy structures, and I firmly believe that my experience of working for the energy industry will be a great benefit in conducting the future assessment of IPCC. And I believe and I hope that my experience will help the next cycle of IPCC assessment.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else? I have a question in the room from Jill Peters of Belgian television.
Good morning. I'm Jill Peters, a weather broadcaster in Belgium. I have in fact two questions. One about communication on climate change. I've been into this since 2006, and I'm in a whole network of weather broadcasters worldwide. And I must say we suffer a lot on this communication on climate change because it's very complex. And all these reports of the IPCC, which are very interesting, aren't that easy to understand all of the time. So we do need some backup, we do need some support. Because as soon as there's news about weather or climate, people and media first come to the weather broadcast people, and then they might go to some client scientists, as you are. So my question to you is, will there be a kind of new strategy, new wind to help communicators in this complex issue?
During the last assessment cycle, the fifth assessment cycle, the IPCC has improved its communication activity greatly. For the first time in the IPCC history, we established a communications office, in fact. And using the communication office, IPCC has been very active in outreach activities right from the release of the two special report and also, as you know, the three assessment report and the synthesis report received a great deal of attention around the world through this venue of outreach activities. We will continue to increase and will continue to intensify these outreach activities so that the IPCC output, IPCC messages will get communicated to the wide audiences around the world. And There's no way that IPCC can convey this important message to the audience around the world other than this more intensified outreach activities. We will continue and improve our outreach activities.
Okay, so then I hope you might visit one of those meetings with weather broadcast people. In fact, it's maybe because of my limited knowledge on climate change, but I think I heard you say about the oil peaking in 2030 earlier on.
Not the oil, the emissions.
The emissions, but
global emissions.
If we have this peak moment in 2030, I thought that would be too late with this limited carbon budget. We have to stay below the 2 degrees. Is that a contradiction, or?
Okay, I'm talking about the Chapter 6 of the Working Group 3 reports, and it says that at the latest, our global emissions should not be above 50 gigaton per year, and at the latest 2030, and to achieve the 2 degrees C stabilization. And so we need to have at least a minus 3% emissions, in other words, 3% reductions emissions every year for the rest of the century, so that by the end of 2100, the net emissions will be 0. That's what the emissions pathway for 2 degrees C stabilization implies. It's a tough task that the world will have to resolve.
Thank you. And I think we have our last question now from Urmi Goswami of the Economic Times in Delhi. There's an effort as part of the Paris Agreement to have a mechanism to ratchet up ambition and for countries to voluntarily draw up long-term plans by 2050 for decarbonisation. How does the IPCC see its role in raising country ambition and drawing up long-term pathways for decarbonisation?
I believe the evaluating the appropriateness of the aggregate of INDC is not really the part of IPCC's mandate. But again, because so much attention is given to the appropriateness of the INDCs relative to the 2 degrees C stabilization, I believe that the request for some role of IPCC in that process will come again and again. I believe that again, this is a matter that the future Bureau will have a time to discuss.
Okay, well that wasn't the last question, but this one is, and it's again from Rahana Dada of the Africa Report, and she asks, so what's the deadline for AR6, the 6th assessment report, and can we expect any surprises?
We haven't yet discussed anything about the AR6 at this point. It is the new Bureau, and it is the plenary's decision to have a very specific design and very specific timeline about the next cycle. So the question is quite early to answer at this point.
Yeah. Okay, well thank you very much, Hoesung. Thank you very much everybody for coming today and for tuning in via the webcast. And I'm sure you'll be talking to Hoesung Lee a lot in the coming months and years. Thank you very much.
Thank you.